I had barely stepped out of the taxi when I saw the two of them standing on my porch. My father and my older brother, smirking like they'd been rehearsing it all day just to blindside me the second I got home. My sea bag was still slung over my shoulder. My boots still dusty from Okinawa. I hadn't even taken 3 steps toward the house before my father said it. "You're homeless now," just like that. No hello, no welcome back, no handshake, nothing. A sentence that hit harder than any blast wave I'd ever felt downrange. Froze. "What are you talking about?" I asked, but my brother, Chad, beer already in hand despite it being barely noon, snorted and said, "We sold your house, bro." Try to keep up. They actually laughed at their son and their brother, a Marine returning from an overseas rotation, standing in the driveway, hearing that everything he owned had been wiped out. My father pointed lazily at the front door as if this were all some routine family decision. "Your brother needed help. Family sacrifices for family. You weren't here. You didn't need the place." Then came the part that told me exactly where I stood in their world. "You Marines bounce around anyway. What difference does a house make?" I should have exploded, should have cursed them out or swung or just collapsed. But instead, I smiled, a slow, steady smile that made both of them shift uncomfortably. My father snapped, "What's so funny?" And I said, "The house you sold was actually..." But before I finished that sentence, I need to take you back to how this whole thing started. Because the truth is, none of this was an accident. They didn't stumble into this betrayal. They planned it, just not as well as they thought. 3 months earlier, I was stationed in Okinawa, halfway through a 6-month rotation. I'd been looking forward to that assignment. Shore duty isn't glamorous, but it's predictable. And predictable is something Marines don't get often. In my off hours, I'd call home, check on the house, make sure nothing was falling apart. I'd owned that place for 8 years, bought it myself after my second deployment, renovated it room by room on my own dime. It was supposed to be my stability, my anchor, my future. But every time I called, something felt wrong. My father sounded irritated, like I was interrupting something. My brother, perpetually starting over, had moved back in with him after losing another job. Anytime I asked what he was doing to get his life together, Dad defended him. "He just needs time." "Don't be so judgmental, Sam." I'd hear dishes clattering in the background. People I didn't recognize. Once, someone yelled, "Did he send the money yet?" And the call cut 2 seconds later. I tried not to overthink it, tried to give them grace. After all, I'd spent my entire adult life gone, training, deploying, moving from base to base. Maybe I didn't understand everything happening at home, but the truth? They weren't confused. They weren't overwhelmed. They were planning something. They thought they'd get away. With 3 months earlier, that itch in my gut kept getting worse. Every time I checked the security cameras back home, someone had turned them off. Not unplugged accidentally, turned off, disabled through the app. Someone with access. There were cars in my driveway I didn't recognize. Once I caught a glimpse of a guy carrying a box through my side door. When I called my father about it, he acted like I was accusing him of treason. "Relax. Sam, you're being paranoid. It's my house too while you're gone. Don't micromanage me from Japan." Except it wasn't his house. Not legally, not financially, not morally. Bought it, I paid the mortgage, I remodeled it, maintained it. Still, he talked like he had equal ownership because he was my dad. And because he had the spare key. Chad, of course, had no explanation at all. He just muttered something about friends crashing and short-term help, and then conveniently hung up. But the final straw came too. Months into my rotation, I received an email from the county recorder's office. Notice of title inquiry. Request filed. Someone had pulled the deed records from my house. That wasn't standard. That wasn't routine. That was someone preparing to sell, refinance, or transfer property, and the request didn't come from me. It came from my father's email. My pulse went cold. I called home. Immediately, Dad answered, breathless, like he'd sprinted to get the phone before Chad did. "What's up, Sam?" "You pulled the deed on my house. Why?" Silence, then an irritated sigh. "You're imagining things. It showed your email. Must be a clerical error, Dad. They don't make clerical errors with personal emails attached to legal documents. What are you doing? What are you two planning?" On the other end, I heard Chad murmur, "Dude, hang up." Then the line went dead. Just like that. I stared at my phone, heart pounding in the Okinawa humidity, so thick it felt like the air itself was warning me. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't miscommunication. This was a setup. A month later, the situation escalated from suspicious to undeniable when a neighbor sent me a video. He'd noticed a moving truck outside my place. Thought maybe I'd authorized something. He filmed it just in case. In the video, my father and brother stood beside the truck, supervising strangers carrying my furniture, my bedroom set, my tools, my gym equipment, everything, loading it piece by piece onto the truck. My father even laughed and said, "Man, Sam won't even notice. He's too busy playing soldier." That's when I stopped giving them grace, stopped giving them excuses, stopped pretending they were confused or overwhelmed or stressed. They weren't. They were robbing me, piece by piece, while I was 7,000 miles away serving my country. So I did the only thing a Marine trained in strategy, timing, and precision could do. I started my own plan. Quietly, calmly, legally, airtight. Because if they wanted war, they picked the wrong son to underestimate. Before I continue, tell, from which place are you watching this story right now? Please subscribe and like the video for motivation. The first thing I did was stop telling them anything. No more updates, no more calls, no more warnings. Silence is a weapon, and I let it sharpen itself. But behind that silence, I moved fast. I contacted my JAG officer, explained the situation, and he immediately looped in a stateside real estate attorney. When I told him what I'd seen in the neighbor's video, he didn't hesitate. "Sergeant, that isn't just shady. That's illegal transfer of property, unauthorized entry, and potential fraud. We're not just dealing with family drama. We're dealing with criminal activity." Good. Wanted it documented. The second step was checking the mortgage. I already knew I was ahead on payments, but when my attorney pulled the financial file, something immediately stood out. 2 months of payments had been made from my father's account, not out of generosity. The man didn't even pay his own bills on time, no. This was a pattern. They're establishing a financial trail, the attorney said. If someone pays a property's mortgage long enough, they can claim partial equity or try to argue joint ownership. It's a manipulation tactic. It was like being stabbed with information. Instead of a knife, my own father was strategically making small payments to open the door for a fraudulent claim. That meant the house wasn't the end game. They wanted long-term control. So I kept digging, and what I found next made everything clear. Utility. Bills had been changed. The mailing address for some of my accounts had been updated. My brother's unemployment paperwork listed my address as his permanent residence. And the last one? The last one was the nuclear bomb, a pending property transfer request, unsigned but logged, waiting for me to approve digitally. Something they planned to force through my compromised email. The IP address that accessed the transfer form wasn't in Okinawa. It was 30 minutes from my house. My father, my brother, together, trying to steal everything I'd built. JAG didn't mince words. "Sergeant, you need to be prepared. They're not bumbling around. This is coordinated fraud. Coordinated fraud." From my own family. Hung up and stared at the screen in the barracks until my eyes burned. For the first time in years, I couldn't sleep, couldn't train it off, couldn't run it off. But Marines aren't taught to panic. We're taught to strategize, so that's what I did. I called the one person I trusted more than anyone, my neighbor Franklin. Former Army, retired, always kept an eye on my place. "Frank, I need a favor," I said quietly. "You name it. I need proof. Real proof. Anything strange, anything suspicious, film it, record it. Document every car, every person, every visit. I need surveillance." He didn't hesitate. "Already been doing it, son. These two have been treating your place like a commune." I exhaled. Slowly, controlled, focused, perfect. Because if they wanted to play dirty, I was about to go surgical. They thought I was trapped overseas, thought I couldn't stop them, thought they could steal my house and smile about it. But the mistake they made, the biggest one, was assuming I didn't prepare. They forgot who I was: a Marine, a planner, a man who never left anything to chance. That house they were trying to rip out from under me. It was already protected, legally, financially, permanently. And they hadn't even realized it. Not yet. The moment I realized they were trying to force a fraudulent transfer, everything inside me clicked into place. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't an accidental overstep. This was a coordinated attempt to gut me, financially, while I was serving halfway across the world. So I contacted my attorney again, not just to update him, but to enact the plan I'd been quietly preparing for years. See, after my divorce, I learned a hard lesson about property and trust. Never leave something valuable tied directly to your own name. So when I bought that house 8 years ago, I didn't list myself as the sole straightforward owner. I placed the deed under a veteran-specific property trust, a structure created legally, cleanly, and airtight, with me listed as trustee, but with several layers preventing anyone from claiming ownership, equity, or sale rights without my explicit in-person signature. No digital signature accepted. No power of attorney loophole. Nothing. It was a fortress on paper. And I never told a soul, not my ex-wife, not my friends, and definitely not my father or brother. My attorney confirmed what I already suspected. Sergeant, even if they had physically dragged you into signing something, it wouldn't have transferred. Legally, they have no path into this trust. He sounded almost impressed. But I wasn't done. I wanted everything they'd done documented. Every payment, every email, every attempt to enter my accounts. So we had a digital forensics team gather data quietly while the trust administrator flagged every suspicious action. Each one became another nail waiting to be hammered into their legal coffin. Meanwhile, Franklin kept sending me videos. My father letting strangers into my house. My brother throwing parties in my living room. People sleeping in rooms I renovated with my own 2 hands after deployment. Once, Franklin filmed a group hauling out my toolbox, the one my late grandfather gave me, and my father actually joked, "Sam won't care. Tools belong to the men who use them." Hearing that made something quiet and dangerous settle inside my chest, but I never confronted them, not yet. Instead, I waited like a sniper, patient, precise, focused on the moment everything would collapse on them at once. And that moment arrived, when the trust administrator informed me that my father and brother had filed something far more serious than a simple attempted sale. They had submitted a primary residency claim stating that they lived at the property full-time and that I was absent by choice and had no intention to return. That claim, if approved, could allow them to fight for occupancy rights, not ownership, but control. The kind of control squatters twist into leverage. The kind of control that costs thousands to unwind. The administrator asked, "Do you want to challenge the claim, Sergeant?" I smirked, "Not yet. Let them think it's working, because..." What they didn't know, what they had no way of knowing, was that filing a false primary residency claim on a property, protected under a federal veteran housing trust, triggers an automatic federal review, one that involves investigators, one that involves the state, one that involves very serious penalties for fraud. They had walked straight into a trap and he didn't even have to set. It was built into the system I'd wisely chosen years ago. So while they celebrated whatever fantasy they thought they were about to pull off, I packed my bags in Okinawa. My rotation ended in 4 days, and I had already arranged everything. The paperwork, the evidence files, the attorney, the trust manager, and even the investigator who wanted to be present when I returned to the residence. I wasn't coming home to argue. I wasn't coming home to plead. I was coming home to watch my father and brother face consequences they had spent their entire lives avoiding. They thought selling my house would make me homeless, but all they really did was make themselves defendants, and I was counting the hours until I stepped off that plane and watched their world collapse. By the time my plane touched down stateside, everything was already in motion. The federal investigator assigned to the case met me right at the terminal, shook my hand and said, "Sergeant, we've reviewed the documentation. Your father and brother dug themselves deep. We drove straight from the airport to my neighborhood, not to confront them immediately, but to perform an official occupancy check with law enforcement present. I watched from the car as the officers walked up to my front door and knocked. My brother answered, half asleep, clutching a beer despite it being barely 10 a.m., and tried to pull the door shut when he saw the badges. Then my father appeared, puffed up chest, acting like some wronged patriarch. "This is my house," he barked. But when the officers asked for documentation, he tried to hand over the fraudulent residency claim he and Chad had filed. The investigator took one glance and said flatly, "Sir, this document..." is under federal review for possible fraud. My father's face drained of color. Chad asked, "What's going on?" But the officers were already stepping inside, cataloging everything. The people staying there illegally, the broken locks they'd replaced, the missing belongings, the party trash, the clear signs they'd treated my home like a free-for-all. Franklin stood on his porch, filming with the biggest grin I'd ever seen. Then the investigator nodded toward me through the window. "Bring him in." I stepped out of the car slowly, boots hitting the driveway with a sound that made both of them freeze. My father's jaw dropped. Chad nearly dropped his beer. "Sam?" my father whispered, like he couldn't understand why I wasn't still trapped across the world. I walked past them without a word and into what used to be my living room. Walls scuffed, furniture gone, a burn mark on the hardwood I refinished myself. The investigator turned to them and said, "You two claimed this was your full-time residence. Yet the deed is held under a veteran-protected trust. You filed access attempts on accounts you don't own. You supervised removal of property that doesn't belong to you. And you attempted to initiate a title transfer without the trustee present. That constitutes criminal fraud." My father exploded, pointing at Chad, blaming him, claiming he didn't understand the paperwork. Chad panicked, babbling about needing money, needing stability, needing a fresh start. They argued with each other so loudly the officers had to separate them. Then the investigator looked at me. "Sergeant, would you like to press charges for the unlawful entry, property removal, and attempted fraud?" My father snapped his head toward me with wild eyes, as if our entire history meant I'd protect him. As if DNA excused betrayal, as if service, sacrifice, and 8 years of building a home meant nothing compared to his convenience. But I didn't yell. I didn't curse. I didn't even raise my voice. I simply said, "Yes, every charge." Their world stopped. My father staggered. Chad choked on his breath, because for the first time in their lives, someone they'd walked over without consequence had finally drawn a line in stone. And it wasn't rage that drove me. It was justice, cold, measured, overdue. The officers didn't put them in cuffs right away. Fraud cases don't always start with a takedown, but the moment they were separated for statements, the shift in power was absolute. My father kept pacing like a caged animal, rubbing the back of his neck, muttering excuses as if rehearsing which version of the truth might save him. Chad slumped into a dining chair they'd dragged in from God knows where, eyes darting around the room like he was calculating escape routes. Meanwhile, I walked through the house, my house, in silence, documenting every violation, every missing item, every drawer emptied or broken. My old metals case was gone, my deployment shadow box cracked, my tools stripped from the garage, my kitchen appliances replaced with cheap, mismatched junk. They hadn't just used my home, they'd pillaged it, disrespected it. The investigator shadowed me, taking notes and photos. "Sergeant," he said quietly, "this is extensive. They're not looking at a slap on the wrist. Combined, this could lead to felony charges." I nodded, but my chest felt strangely numb. It wasn't victory. It wasn't satisfaction. It was the cold realization that these two men had never once seen me as family unless it benefited them. Then came the moment that solidified everything. One of the officers approached me and said, "We found several documents in a bedroom drawer that appear to be forged signatures, attempted on your behalf." He handed me a folder. Inside were printed forms, property transfer authorizations, notarization requests, residency declarations, each with signatures that were clearly meant to mimic mine but looked like they'd been scribbled by someone guessing. Rage didn't hit me instantly. It seeped in slowly like poison. My father had tried to forge my signature. My brother had helped. They weren't just reckless, they were deliberate, premeditated, hungry. The officer looked uncomfortable as he asked, "Do you recognize any of these?" I closed the folder. "I recognize what they tried to do when they finally brought my father and brother back into the living room." The investigator laid everything out on the coffee table. Photos, videos, the forged documents, the digital footprint analysis, the mortgage payment history, the fraudulent residency claim. "Gentlemen," he said, "this is overwhelming evidence of coordinated fraud, theft, unlawful occupancy, and attempted identity manipulation." Chad's face twisted. "I didn't forge anything!" Dad was in charge. My father snapped back, "Shut up, Chad. You were the one who told me to pull the deed." They devolved into a screaming match, throwing each other under the bus in front of law enforcement. It would have been funny if it wasn't so pathetic. When the yelling reached its peak, the investigator raised his voice. "Enough!" And both men froze. He turned to me. "Sergeant, your decision still stands? You want full charges?" My father finally broke. He looked at me with something between fear and disgust, and for the first time, I realized he wasn't scared of jail. He was scared that I had finally stopped playing the loyal son. "Sam, you don't have to do this," he said, voice cracking in a way I'd never heard. "We're family. Family." The word hit me like a joke told at the wrong funeral. Stepped forward, looked him dead in the eyes and said, "Family doesn't steal your home while you're serving your country. Family doesn't forge your name. Family doesn't treat your life like free real estate." His eyes watered, but I didn't soften. "You taught me my whole life that actions have consequences. Today, you get to live by your own rules." Chad's chair scraped back as he stood up, voice desperate now. "Sam, please. Man, just give us a break." I turned toward the investigator and repeated, even clearer this time, "Yes, I want every single charge pursued." The officers didn't hesitate. This time, the cuffs came out. My father stiffened as the metal clicked around his wrists. Chad's knees buckled, tears hitting the floor as they read him his rights. The sight didn't give me joy. It didn't heal anything, but it did draw one sharp, necessary breath of relief from deep inside me because, for the first time in a long time, justice wasn't some distant idea. It was real. It was happening. It was earned. And as they were walked out of my house, past the neighbors, watching from their yards, past the cameras Franklin held high like a badge of honor, past the officers who'd seen this story 1,000 times but still looked disappointed in them, I stood in the doorway, unblinking, unshaken, because the boy they raised would have forgiven them. The Marine they underestimated wouldn't. The next morning, I woke up to the quiet hum of my phone vibrating on the nightstand. Dozens of notifications, missed calls, messages, and frantic voicemails crowded the screen. Most were from Melissa. A few were from unknown numbers that I instantly recognized as her family. For a moment, I just stared at the phone, letting the silence settle around me. I wasn't rushing anymore. I wasn't scrambling to fix something that wasn't mine to fix. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt my heartbeat in my own chest instead of someone else's. Finally, I played one of her voice messages. Her voice cracked as she begged me to talk. She said she needed to explain that she didn't want things to end like this, that she loved me and made a mistake. I closed the message halfway through. "You don't mistake your way into another man's bed. You choose it." And she had chosen it over and over again. Instead of replying, I drove to my workshop, the one place that never lied to me. The smell of sawdust, engine grease, and cold metal welcomed me like an old friend. I rolled up my sleeves and threw myself into work, letting the rhythm of physical labor drown out whatever lingering emotion tried to crawl back up. That's when my foreman Greg walked in with a teasing smirk until he saw my face. One look and he dropped the jokes. "You okay, Sam?" he asked quietly. I told him the truth, and for the first time the story didn't feel heavy. It felt like I was finally dropping the weight I had been dragging for months. Later that afternoon, a delivery truck pulled up with a long tube addressed to me. Inside was the finalized renovation blueprint for the house Melissa and I were supposed to buy. The house I had dreamed about. The house she had used as a leash. I sat on a crate studying the drawing. I imagined us in that living room. I imagined the life she pretended we were building. Then I folded the blueprint carefully, slid it back into the tube, and tossed it into the scrapwood bin. Some things aren't worth rebuilding. By evening, Melissa showed up at the workshop door. She looked shaken, hair messy, eyes swollen, mascara running. She tried stepping inside, but I blocked her. She kept repeating that she didn't want to lose me, that she wanted to start fresh, that she could fix everything. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't rage. I simply told her the truth. I'm done being a backup plan in my own marriage. Her face crumpled, like those words were sharper than any punch I could have thrown. She asked if I was really going to walk away from everything we had. I looked her straight in the eye and said, "No, I'm walking away from everything you destroyed." Then I shut the door, slowly, not slamming it. Because endings don't always need fury. Sometimes the cleanest break is simply choosing yourself. The days that followed felt strangely calm, Like stepping out of a storm you didn't realize you'd been living in. Melissa kept trying. Calls, messages, even showing up at places she knew I'd be, but I stayed steady. I wasn't cruel, just unreachable. Her desperation only confirmed what I already knew. She hadn't been afraid of losing me. She'd been afraid of losing the life I provided. And once I saw that truth clearly, there was no going back. My lawyer moved quickly, the evidence was airtight, and even the mediator seemed stunned by how clean the case was. Melissa tried to spin her story a dozen ways, but every path led back to the same place. Her choices, her lies, her consequences. In the end, the settlement leaned heavily in my favor, and she walked out looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. Not because I defeated her, but because she finally had to stand alone. 1 month later, I moved into a new place, a wide, quiet loft above the workshop. No ghosts, no memories, no apologies etched into the walls. Just space, light, and the promise of a man rebuilding himself. Greg brought over a case of beer. The guys helped carry up the furniture, and for the first time in a long while, I felt something real flutter in my chest. Relief, freedom, a life that belonged entirely to me. The best part came unexpectedly. I was cleaning up one evening when an email pinged on my phone. It was from a renovation company I'd applied to months ago, back when I still thought my life was stuck in her shadow. They wanted to bring me on as a project lead, a role I'd dreamed about but never felt. Ready for funny how clarity clears the path, I accepted without hesitation. Sometimes, betrayal doesn't break you. Sometimes it wakes you up. It strips away the illusion, the noise, the weight that never should have been yours. And when you walk through it, you come out sharper, stronger, and absolutely unwilling to settle for crumbs ever again. Melissa's chapter in my life didn't end with rage, revenge, or regret. It ended exactly the way it needed to, with me choosing myself.